Deep within the shifting, endless dunes of the Libyan desert, there's this translucent green mystery. It's something that, honestly, by all conventional logic, just shouldn't exist. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're investigating a massive enigma buried out in the sand. We're looking at a huge swath of the Sahara where the very ground itself was subjected to an event of just unimaginable violence. We aren't just talking about a hot day in the desert. We're talking about an ancient, catastrophic thermal pulse that literally melted the Earth. And when I say melted, we're talking about temperatures reaching 2,000 degrees Celsius. To put that sheer extremity into perspective for you, to turn sand into glass, you need temperatures between 1,700 and 2,000 degrees. So, the absolute crucial point here is that this thermal pulse was far, far hotter than anything ancient human technology could ever dream of producing. I mean, it's way hotter than your most devastating natural wildfires, and it even totally eclipses many volcanic processes. Whatever happened out there was incredibly sudden and absolutely intense.
So think about this. What could possibly melt a sprawling desert into glass so impossibly pure and so brilliantly yellow-green that it would eventually be carved into a sacred scarab and worn by King Tutankhamun himself? How did this incredibly rare material, forged tens of thousands of years ago, end up as the centerpiece jewel for one of history's most famous pharaohs? We have the physical evidence right there in our hands, the glass itself. But the culprit? Well, that remains incredibly elusive.
Okay, let's dive into this. Act 1. The crime scene.
Picture this as a 30,000-year-old crime scene, sitting right in one of the most unforgiving places on the entire planet, the desolate border between Libya and Egypt. And the sheer scale of the physical evidence here is absolutely staggering. We are not looking at a little campfire pit. We're talking about hundreds of square kilometers just covered in shattered pieces of this bright, rare yellow-green material. It's not normal glass, and it definitely isn't volcanic. It's a super-specific, incredibly pure substance called Libyan Desert Glass. Just let that sink in for a second. Tens of thousands of years ago, an event so massive occurred that it instantly transformed hundreds of square kilometers of raw desert into a sea of glass.
But here is where our investigation hits a massive brick wall. If we've got heat exceeding 2,000 degrees, we should definitely see the usual natural suspects, right? But we don't. There are absolutely no lava flows anywhere in the region, zero volcanic vents. And honestly, the most baffling part of all, there is no massive impact crater. If a giant meteor had slammed into the Earth and melted all that sand, there should be a gigantic structural scar left behind. But the desert floor? It is stubbornly, completely flat.
Act 2. The mainstream suspect.
So, since we don't have a crater and we don't have a volcano, mainstream science had to systematically interrogate a new prime suspect to explain this insane heat. And this suspect actually comes from the sky, a cosmic airburst. Basically, this happens when an asteroid or a comet enters Earth's atmosphere, but instead of hitting the ground and gouging out a crater, the intense friction and pressure cause it to just explode midair. Imagine a sudden catastrophic explosion raining a massive concussive wave of heat and pressure down over a massive area. Now, what's really interesting about this is when you start comparing the crime scenes, glaring inconsistencies pop up. Let's look at a known cosmic airburst, the Tunguska Event of 1908 over in Siberia. Tunguska flattened over 2,000 square kilometers of trees. It was completely devastating. But Tunguska didn't melt the ground into glass. By contrast, our Libyan Desert Event melted hundreds of square kilometers of sand into pure glass. But it didn't leave behind the massive structural destruction or the crater we'd expect. The profiles just kind of don't match up.
Act 3. Anomalies in the sand.
Because, the closer researchers and geologists actually study this Libyan desert glass under a microscope, the stranger the whole mystery gets. Trapped inside the glass itself, we're finding these tiny, highly specific mineral inclusions. We're finding shocked quartz, which is a material that literally only forms under immense, instantaneous pressure. These microscopic clues are practically screaming that there was extreme, sudden violence. It was an unimaginably powerful pressure event. But again, without that traditional impact crater, it makes it incredibly tough to just write the whole thing off as a standard meteorite strike. And the plot thickens even more. When you study the actual distribution of the glass, the heat doesn't look like it was just a giant, evenly dispersed blanket of fire falling from the sky. Instead, the heat actually appears localized, directional. So we really have to ask, if it was just a standard meteor explosion, where is the crater? And why does the thermal damage look so much like a focused energy release? It's almost as if the blast didn't just hit the Earth, it targeted it.
Act 4. Shadows of ancient arsenals.
Because of these massive, glaring gaps in the physical evidence, some highly controversial and frankly speculative hypotheses have emerged to try and connect the dots. Two of the most radical theories out there push way past standard geology. Theory 1 suggests advanced ancient civilizations, basically societies predating recorded history that somehow possess technologies capable of harnessing directed energy or plasma, essentially forgotten superweapons. Theory 2 points to ancient astronauts, the idea of extraterrestrial intervention, where advanced beings interacted with early Earth and left behind the residue of some unbelievable technology. Now, we aren't endorsing these viewpoints, but it is absolutely fascinating to see how people are trying to explain the seemingly unexplainable.
And honestly, here's the wild part. When you actually run the physics on these science fiction-sounding ideas, it gets weird. If a high-energy plasma discharge or some sort of directed thermal beam were used, what exactly would it do? Well, according to some physicists, it would instantly melt surface material. It would create incredibly pure glass, and crucially, it would leave minimal structural impact, meaning no crater. Surprisingly enough, a directed energy event eerily matches our physical crime scene evidence point for point.
Act 5. The Witnesses.
So we've got all this bizarre physical evidence, and we've got wild theories ranging from cosmic airbursts all the way to ancient plasma weapons. But were there any actual witnesses to an event like this? Well, as it turns out, history might have left us a few clues. And this brilliantly illustrates the human side of our mystery. Across North Africa, ancient oral traditions describe horrifying events that sound shockingly familiar to our crime scene. They talk about falling suns. They describe blinding flashes coming from the sky. They tell these vivid stories of entire lands instantly turned to ash and smoke.
Which leaves us staring down a pretty massive question. Are these literal, historical accounts of a sudden, violent destruction from the sky that early humans actually witnessed? Or are they simply symbolic myths, exaggerated stories passed down over generations just to make sense of a frightening world? This really matters because these universal stories of sudden destruction aren't just local anomalies. Finding where the line is drawn between myth and actual memory, well, that could completely rewrite our understanding of early human history.
The final verdict. All right, let's pull back and look at the whole board here. We've examined the melted sands, the missing craters, the scientific models, and those ancient stories. So where does the investigation stand today? To be perfectly clear and grounded about it, mainstream science still heavily points to the cosmic airburst. It remains the most evidence-backed theory we've currently got, and it does fit many of the geological observations. But as you've seen, it doesn't tie up every loose end perfectly. The anomalous directional heat, the sheer impossible purity of the glass, the complete lack of a crater, and those haunting ancient stories, they all live right in the gaps of that physical evidence. And in those gaps, that's where speculation and deep curiosity absolutely thrive.
Ultimately, the desert still holds its silence. Was this all just a rare, freak cosmic explosion that we only barely understand? Or, as some dare to ask, are we actually looking at the terrifying residue of something deliberately created? A forgotten technology from a forgotten time? I'll leave that hanging for you to ponder. Keep wondering, keep questioning, and thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.